Hi, welcome back to Rebel Movement Podcast. My name is Billy. My pronouns are they, them, or she, her. Welcome to episode 100. I super appreciate each and every one of you listening. Now, it is a small audience still. I don't want to come on here and, if you know me, it seems like such a fake thing to say. I really value congruence and authenticity and being open and honest about shit. I don't want to come on here and be like, oh, I have hundreds of listeners, which is not true. There have been well over 1,000 listens total, which is amazing and so cool. But the total average, according at least to the incorrect data on Spotify, is like 28 listens per episode ish, which is amazing and so much more than it used to be. And also this could grow more. So if you have a second, if you rate, review, and subscribe this podcast, it makes a big difference. If you send this to a friend, it makes a big difference. And if you feel like celebrating for episode 100, you can buy me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. It's like $5 Canadian. If you want to celebrate with me, I don't make money off podcast. It's not sponsored. And I don't know the other terms, but I do think there's a lot of value in the stuff that we talk about here. I think a lot of importance in the stuff we talk about, and some of the I don't know. I feel like most of the conversations, all of the conversations, are things that I wish were talked about more often. I know we're part of our tagline is that we're trying to reduce stigma. We're trying to talk about some of the shit that's taboo and shouldn't be taboo, and raise awareness, and just be out here being human, doing semi-rebellious or very rebellious things. And I love where we've come with the podcast. If you've been here since the beginning, or even if you just came and you're like catching up, I really appreciate you. I know there's a few of you that have been here since the beginning, and you've heard me talk for over 100 episodes, and for 52 of those, you also heard my old wonderful co-host talk, named Jordan. I appreciate you. I know that she appreciates you, and all of my guests appreciate you too. Thank you for being here again. The link is in the show notes, or I think that it's um, Ko-fi, Kofi, maybe with the dash between, Move with Billy. It's in the show notes, or you can just DM me or email me if you need that link and don't have it. So, and before we get going, I also want to thank Elise for doing the captions or the transcript. She's done them for the last, what is it, this number 5, I think. And I really appreciate it. She's my very first employee. I'm a small business. Um, it feels like a very big deal for me. And I think that Elise is awesome. And we have a lot of the same values, which I think is really important. Um, and I just am excited. I wanted to share that with you. I've been thinking a lot about what to talk about for this episode 100, and I had a few different ideas, and I'm going to not go with any of them. I think they're all good ideas. How to start a podcast, how to start a business, starting a business as a yoga teacher. I'm going to come back to those. And because I think that there's some things we need to talk about that are more important or more time pressing. Um, I have 2 topics I'm going to go through, and it's going to be a fairly short episode because I have to go do school pickup in a little while for one of my stepkids. I also will name that when I'm recording this, it's the day between Mother's Day and my mother's birthday. And if you've been around for a while, you know that I'm estranged from my mom for almost about 7 years now because I was emotionally abused. And turns out, um, sexually abused, not by her, but within the house I lived in. And this year feels particularly rough. So I'm doing my best to show up. That's another reason I'm making this kind of short. It's because I just want to lay down outside. I'm having some sad feelings, and I'm not gonna, again, don't want to come on here and just pretend that like everything is figured out and everything is great, because that's not how life works, and it's harmful when we go around like that, because it's a normal human experience. Everyone has shit they're going through. Anyway, more on that for the second top part of this episode. I want to talk about things happening in Palestine, and I want to talk about mental health because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Both of these topics could be several different episodes on their own. We only have the one episode where it's just you and me this week. And I will come back to these things and I'll probably insert some of the stuff as we go, but they're I think that they both needed a little bit of time. And yeah, but this is the beginning of a conversation. If you want more, you can send me messages. I talk about it on Facebook and in my newsletter a lot, or and Instagram, but in my newsletter a lot. So that's a good place to go. If you are interested in these topics, go subscribe to my newsletter. Again, link is below. Okay. So speaking of newsletters, the first part of this is stuff that I wrote for my newsletter that I think is I'm gonna read them out here because inspired by Shane and Crow a few weeks ago, I think it's worth saying again and again and again and again. These are updates that I posted that I put in my newsletter of things that have been happening recently. They are not all of the updates. There's a lot. If you want more, if you go to my TikTok at Move with Billy, under the repost section, it's like two arrows that are making a circle. Most of the things I've reposted are things about Palestine. I would say 95%. Some of them might be mental health related or things like that, like more mental health stuff. But a good portion of them is going to be stuff about Gaza. So if you're not sure where to go, where to look to learn about the genocide happening, there's a place, like, because I know the way the algorithms work, it might be hard to find. Go in there, search it. And also I post stuff in my stories. And I know that my friend Shannon Crow does post stuff in her stories. Do your best to find people who are in Palestine as well, who are Palestinian or who have are firsthand experiencing or know someone experiencing, because they are we need to raise their voices. Okay, so in the past 219 days from today, so we start October 7th, and the genocide of Palestinians started well before that. But throughout the last 219 days, the genocide against Palestinians has been, I don't want to say amped up, maybe amped up. During the last 219 days, though, folks living within Palestine have been pushed to different areas of the country. So it's not exactly accurate, but if you imagine it like a longer, well, maybe just look at a map, but you know how it's like a longer shape of a country, like it's a small, very, very, very small space, but it's like a long, not like a square, but like a rectangle type of thing. Not exactly rectangle, but you know what I mean. So Israel has dropped leaflets and started at the top of the country, in North Gaza or Haza, saying this place is not safe. Go to Haza, go down, travel down. And I don't know if down is the exact direction, but for the case of this, so that it's easier to explain with words, go to Gaza City or Haza to be safe. So all of these people lost their homes. Hospitals were bombed. Universities were bombed. Ambulances, schools, and then after a while, it happened in Haza or Gaza. Leaflets were dropped. This is not safe. You have to go down. It kept happening. It's a very small. It's a very densely populated country, and now folks are down in Rafah, and that's the bottom of the country. That's the border. Rafah crossing, I believe, is between Palestine and Egypt. However, Israeli military is now in control of Rafah crossing, and they're not letting people cross. And when they do, not enough people. And they're to the left of this country is the Mediterranean Sea. To the right, of course, is Israel. And they are also not only dropping bombs, but their military forces are invading from Israel's side. So there's a lot of people with nowhere to go that are now being bombed in the place that they were told they were safe. So not only has there been, like, all of these major hospitals have been bombed, Israel is in charge of, or has control over, their hydro, which is not enough time in a day for anything, not enough for hospital care, not enough for um, cooking, like just not enough. And then there's not clean drinking water. Um, but now there's all of these people with nowhere to go, and the at least 34,971 people have been murdered, and 78,641 have been wounded. This is the numbers as of 2 days ago, an estimated. And, and at the same time, 2 days ago, about 80 bodies were recovered from 3 mass graves inside Al Shifa Hospital, which is a complex within Gaza City. Um, the other thing, and again, this is a big topic, and I think that it's really worth going into more, learning about more. I do want to name this. We've talked about this on the podcast before a couple of times now. If you're not sure where to look, I know that there was one with Shannon Crow. There was one where I was reading out a newsletter. I can't remember any of the numbers. I should have looked this up beforehand. You can just DM me and I will send you them. But when I'm talking about the genocide in Palestine, I am not saying, I'm not speaking against Jewish folks. I am not being anti-Semitic by saying that genocide against Palestinians is wrong and needs to stop, and saying ceasefire. Those are not related. I understand that the way that Israel is marketing this is that it is they're marketing it as an attack against Jewish folks, and if you look into it, it's not hard to see that that's not what's happening. So I just want to name that I am not being anti-Semitic by speaking up against the genocide happening in Palestine. And if that is a reaction for you, I believe that you should look into this more, and be more educated from people who are actually within Palestine, and diversify some of the places you're getting your information from. The second thing, I guess, I don't know if the second thing is a way of, actually, no, I'm going to say this part first. If you want to help folks in Palestine beyond learning about it, speaking about it, if you want to financially help, you can go to Operation Olive Branch. You should find a link tree. And within the link tree, there is a sheets, like a spreadsheet that has all sorts of different GoFundMes for different Palestinian families. So you can go to Operation Olive Branch. I'll put it in the show notes, and check out that. And again, as I said, if you want to learn more and you're not sure, you're not getting the videos, you can go to my TikTok and look at my shared, reposted, whatever you call it. The other thing I talked about a little bit in my newsletter, which I'm not going to talk about as much here, is there's a block party happening where people are blocking celebrities and influencers and folks who have not spoken up about Palestine. If you're not aware of this, you can either read my newsletter or you can just search it. It's not hard to find. At least today with my For You page, it's not hard to find. Part of this was sparked by the fact that there was you know what, I'll just say it, whatever. There was an influencer who went, I don't know if they went to the Met Gala. I honestly don't particularly watch Met Gala stuff, but they posted a video about the Met Gala. Understanding was that they went and they're in this big fancy dress and said, "Let them eat cake," which, if you're not aware of, is the story of it. There's questions whether or not the actual Marie Antoinette actually said this, but the story goes that when Marie Antoinette learned about her peasants, or the poorer folks living in her around her, could not afford bread and couldn't eat and were starving, she said, "Let them eat cake." Basically, completely indifferent, I would say beyond indifferent, to the poor class suffering and dying and starving. which when this influencer used it, completely completely like read the room. This is not the time to use that. First of all, tickets to the Met Gala are $75,000. And beyond that, there's things like someone was carrying a 22.5K purse that was made of ice, like literal ice, water that's frozen with a golden rose inside. About, it's talking about, it's to do with impermanence or whatever. Basically, with everything happening, if you're not aware, there's also food prices in Canada are skyrocketing, and folks are boycotting Loblaws, which is a different story. But basically, people can't afford food. There's so much happening in the world, and then people not that far away from us in Palestine have no water, have no food, have no place to go, and are being murdered in a genocide every day. And there's people are using this sound, and there's it started this whole movement, people kind of getting fed up a little bit with celebrity culture, people who have so much money and have big platforms who could speak about the genocide and important things happening in the world, but don't. And it's more about using platforms to speak up about the genocide, and so people are blocking them. Which, if one of the things I questioned was like, oh, I'm not following these people, does it make a difference? Yes, it does. However, did notice on TikTok they started a couple of the people who I had blocked. It unblocked them for me for some reason. So you might have to go check if you have done this. You might have to go back in and check. But yes, it does make a difference, because when the way that the ad targeting works and that kind of thing, they can make money off of you seeing their ads and that kind of thing. And when they're involved with other companies. Okay, so that's basically a short version. Some of the things going on, but I think do deserve some time. The other thing that I want to mention, that I want to talk about a bit, is Mental Health Awareness Month. I haven't talked about this as much this month because I don't really think it should just be a month. I have a real issue with things like Bell Let's Talk Day, because Bell is not a company that really supports mental health of their employees. And also just one day a month or one day a year, or I think maybe a couple, I don't know, speaks about mental health, and it's not enough. And it's not actually making a huge difference. It's just trendy. You know what I mean? Like they talk about the trendy parts of mental illness, which it shouldn't be trendy. But like things like depression and anxiety are talked about a lot more than things like borderline personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder or trauma. And there's certain things that are okay, like not as taboo to talk about, and there's certain things that are considered very taboo to talk about. And I have very big emotions about the whole thing. I do think there's value in having a month where we're talking about mental health. I think that it needs to be talked about more. So this year I haven't talked about it as much because this past year has been a difficult one for me. And I've just sort of been sometimes doing what I had to do to cope. So I want to talk about this a little bit now, but it is something I will talk about more. And I have talked about throughout my podcast of trauma, healing from eating disorders, and different things like that. There's tons of different episodes. I think 2 weeks ago, we talked about someone else's experience healing from eating disorder. So stick around for sure. If this is an important topic for you, we do talk about it a lot. But I just think that, I do want to say something for May because it is important to me. I just have an issue with it being trendy to do once a year. You know what I mean? So one of my main values as a business and as a person, honestly, more so than, my business for sure, but because it's so important for me as a person, is authenticity or congruency, which is basically like what you see on the outside is what you get on the inside. Like if I'm advertising or speaking a certain way, that's what you get when you sign up for the class, kind of thing. I like this partially because I have a really hard time when I can tell if, like, just in a personal way, that someone is putting forward a mask, not a mask as in like you're masking for ADHD or autism, but as in like you're pretending everything is great all the time. And that's not the case. Or you're the person who's like, oh, I'm such a nice person. I'm such a nice person, but isn't nice. The person who's like saying their things and they're actually a very toxic person. That I have an issue with that. I have a really hard time with it. And I also have a hard time with the taboo-ness of mental health talk. Um, because I think it's bullshit. I grew up in a time where it was not, you didn't really talk about mental health stuff very much. Therapy was seen as a weakness at times. I'm so glad that's different now. And it's just, I like got a lot of messages like, oh, if you're, depression, you can never be happy and you can never be successful and no one will ever love you until you love yourself and blah, blah, blah. And all of that stuff is bullshit. Spiritual bypassing is so rampant in the wellness industry and yoga world and westernized places, and it's a big topic for me. Has a lot of feelings, and really I first of all don't agree with the values of that, of spiritual bypassing, of pretending everything is great and that's the only way to get through, because I've been a person who has struggled with mental health and trauma and felt, and like, I'm not just talking about like the nice parts of it, not the nice parts, but the parts that are talked about more. I mean, like I've struggled with eating disorders and I've struggled with self-harm and I've struggled with suicidal ideation and I've struggled with shame and I've struggled with recovered memories, and I've been through a lot of shit. And I know that the impact it can have to hear someone else say, I've been through that too, and I see you. Not as a contest, but just as a way of like, I get what you're going through. Because when we don't talk about things, when we think we're the only ones that are going through this, first of all, we think no one can understand us, and that's fucking lonely. And also, we carry so much shame around what we're going through. I went through this a lot within the past year, when I came to accept that I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. At first, I felt so ashamed. And when I did start to talk about it a little bit more, someone said to me, it is not us that should be ashamed, it's them, the people who did this to us. And when I found people who had been through it and who understood the impact, I can't even explain to you how big it's like your soul is being hugged. I explained to it like that in my newsletter. I explained it like that in my newsletter. It's a massive difference when we talk about the shit we've gone through, not in a way that you're trauma dumping. I'm not saying like, don't go to a therapist, just dump it all on your friends. I'm saying face your shit and deal with it. And then don't pretend everything's fine all the time. Like, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. None of these feelings are the problem. The problem is the culture around it. The problem is the belief that having these things is wrong for some reason. The problem is this idea that if you struggle or if you're a survivor of mental health or mental illness or trauma or whatever, that you can't be successful, you can't run a business, no one will want to buy from you, no one will want to love you, no one will want to be in a relationship. That's the problem, and that's bullshit. Which is why I talk about it, because I thought when I first started teaching that the only way I could be a good teacher is if I didn't struggle with mental health. And that's because I was literally told that in different words, but I was basically told that. And I hate that. It's bullshit and it's not true. And everybody struggles with something. Everybody has hard days. And the harm it can cause to pretend that those days never happen to the best of us, in quotes, best of us, or that it's a personal weakness if you have these things, is, it's unspeakable. There's so much harm that can be caused. And that's why, although it's awkward as fuck and it's difficult and it's vulnerable, I talk about it. Do I still sometimes have a voice in my head saying, oh, no one's going to want to support my business if I admit that I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse? Yes. Do I actually believe that, does like myself, my logical brain believe that's the case? No. Would I not buy like support a business if they were open about that? No, that would be why I support them, or one of the reasons. If they also, align with my values and I like what they're doing. Um, I'm more I love when people are honest and open and they feel congruent, that they're honest about the tough shit they've been through, and yet they're also showing that it doesn't have to be your whole life. That you have the hard times, you have the hard days, but you also have the good days. I think both the hard and difficult and the great and the wonderful and in between, all of those days and moments have equal value and equal um I got distracted because I think my caption stopped working, so I hope that they're still working. They all have importance and they're all worth speaking about, because your value does not change whether you're sad or you're angry or you're happy or whatever. Your value is there all the time, unchanging. Um, this is a heavy episode. There's a lot of stuff in it. I do think it's all important. And oh, now all the captions are back all at one time, all over my screen. Okay. This is a heavy episode, and yet I think it's really important. Um, if I were to give you action steps, like as a summary of this, is number one, learn about what's happening in Palestine and share the things you're learning, whether that's in a conversation with a friend, whether you're literally sharing on social media. You might decide to participate in the blockout party or block party, whatever you call it, and block celebrities or brands like Loblaws, for example. If you can participate in the Loblaws boycott, I also support that. Where I live, No Frills is the cheapest grocery store, which I hate, and I can't really afford to go to Metro or Foodland all the time. It's kind of also like a choice between different evils. But um, I mean, if you want to support my buy me a coffee, maybe I could afford to go to those grocery stores, just to sneak that in there. But um, do what you can, get from different places, buy local when you can. If you can't afford to go to a different store, if you're in an area where there is a different store that's also cheap, like go there. I mean, you could try the dollar store, you could try Bulk Barn, you could try, I don't know, um, other places where you can, or just don't buy their brand, the store brand, when you go to those stores. You could also, again, if you have the means to, support any of those families from the Operation Olive Branch spreadsheet of GoFundMe's. And in terms of Mental Health Awareness Month, you could learn about mental health. For example, if you have a friend that has mental health struggles, you might just look into what that feels like for them. You ask them if that's a thing that you can do. You could search, like, in my case, like how to support survivors of childhood sexual abuse. I will say though, some of the like things like borderline personality disorder and DID, when you search those things, particularly borderline personality disorder, it's the most stigmatized mental illness, um, as well as DID is stigmatized as well. But when you search some of these things, a lot of the information you're going to find is like how to be friends with them. You don't. So I would not, Google those ones, because it's just going to might cause more harm than good. You might try to find people who have those things, who have borderline, to learn from. People, like, learn from more credible sources, and avoid anything. If you find anything basically being like, if someone has mental illness, like, avoid them. Just like fuck that resource, because that's not good. That's a horrible take. Yeah, and if you want to support me, you can find my GoFund, not GoFundMe. What do you call it? Coffee, my Buy Me a Coffee thing in the show notes. Thank you for being here for 100 episodes. We have more interviews coming up soon. I'm pretty excited again for all of them. And then you'll hear from me and then we'll maybe do more interviews and we'll just kind of see what happens. But playing around with this kind of new structure thing. And yeah, I got to go because I got to go do school pickup. Thank you for being here. I hope you have a fantastic day. Please rate, review, subscribe. If you have feedback, and send it below or info@movewithbillie.com, BILLIE. Rate, review, subscribe this podcast as well as Move with Billie on, well, the podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And Move with Billie, you can review me on Google and on Facebook. And we'll see you next week. Bye.